So President Trump introducing Prime Minister Modi as his friend, saying India-U.S. relationship has never been stronger. He spoke about a lot of issues. Prime Minister Modi as well taking questions. What does this mean for the India-U.S. relationship? Remember, both the sides are looking for quick wins. The Prime Minister's visit comes within just days of Trump administration 2.0 beginning. Kriti Upadhyay, founder of Indus Tech Council, as well as Dr. Richard L. Benken, author and geopolitical analyst on the broadcast with us. Thank you for joining us. Kriti, what were the key takeaways for you from this meeting?
Well, thanks for having me here. I think firstly, it was good to see the natural bonhomie between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, which I think all of us were missing since the last Howdy Modi and Namaste Trump. In terms of substantial takeaways, I think, of course, Republicans have always been focused on terrorism and seeing the U.S. returning one of the 2611 accused was something good. And then I think on more substantive, I think there's been a lot of talk about tariffs, but let's not forget that it was in the first Trump administration that we came very, very close to actually finalizing a trade deal. So I think even if we get into some of those tariff wars between U.S. and India, overall, I see great potential for actually maybe going ahead, picking up some of those threads from the last administration and actually concluding that ever elusive U.S.-India trade deal. On defense, too, I think there are a lot of things on the table right now. We still have to finalize the GE jet engine deal. And then there's some follow-on orders, such as the P-8Is and the transport aircraft that India already has and is probably going to get additional more of those, as well as the follow-on support. And then there's some new deals as well, like Stryker, Javelin. Some of these do have a co-production angle over there. I think this is also a good time to actually make the civil nuclear deal a reality, especially with India going ahead and signaling that it's going to actually make some amendments to those nuclear liability laws. So I think there's a lot that can be achieved, and the next 4 years are looking very hopeful.
Okay, the next 4 years are looking very hopeful. Dr. Richard, do you agree? F-35 deal on the cards. The president also spoke about radical Islam and dealing with terrorism across the world. The Prime Minister of India also spoke about the significance of the Indo-U.S. ties.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me on the show. Clearly, it was anyone who saw it, it was a real love fest. Certainly between the two individuals, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi. But I think you could see the affection between our two countries, the United States and India. And I think that bodes well. I think what's particularly important when we look at all the things, man, there were just so many things they decided to do and agree on. I think one of the things we want to point out is, in addition to all the other military hardware that the United States will be selling to India, they included F-35 fighters. And I have to tell you, a lot of countries, not a whole lot of countries, are able to buy those F-35 fighters. And I think that right there tells us a lot. It tells us the standing with which the United States, and in particular this administration, and hopefully most of the people in the United States, the standing with which we hold India. And secondly, I believe those F-35 fighters are an indication of the critical nature of that cooperation, the critical role that India is going to play in what we've been seeing now for the last several years is a grand coalition of authoritarianism arrayed against the forces of democracy and freedom. And you cannot have two greater manifestations of democracy than the world's largest democracy and the world's oldest democracy.
Yes.
So I think it's what that meeting and what the subsequent news conferences showed us was the importance of the U.S.-India relationship and the key role that India will be playing in supporting those forces of democracy against state fascism.
Absolutely. And in fact, India made its stance clear as well as hours before this meeting, President Trump had also spoken to Putin as well as Zelensky. He also made a mention of that. So the role that India and the United States play in the world geopolitics as well. Dr. Richard and Kriti, I request you to stay with us for just a moment. Let's go across to senior executive editor Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan joining us on the broadcast. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. and he was present there during that press briefing. Madhav, a lot of takeaways, a lot of talking points from that meeting and from that press briefing.
Well, Pratibha, I'm sorry, the audio line is very poor. I couldn't get your question very clearly. But yes, I was there at the White House when the two leaders met, at the Oval Office, and then there was a joint briefing, perhaps one of the longest such joint briefings that we've seen, in recent times. And President Trump and Prime Minister Modi answering a lot of very important questions when it comes to India-U.S. relations and, of course, the implications of several of these things. Let me begin with, the entire aspect of the defense cooperation. That's a very, very important thing because President Trump very specifically said that they expect that India will be purchasing billions of dollars more of military equipment. At the same time, Prime Minister Modi talking about the fact that the two countries could cooperate, and of course the entire issue of co-production of defense equipment also coming up very clearly. The two countries coming together as far as that crucial aspect is concerned. There's also, of course, a very important area of Tahawur Rana and his return to India. President Trump very specifically stating that he would not be the only one, that there would be other requests which have come in would also be very seriously considered. And Prime Minister Modi also thanking and welcoming the fact that Tahawur Rana, the 2611 accused or mastermind, is going to be returned to India. And at the same time, coming out to say that the courts in India are well equipped to deal with this individual and this particular case. So that's as far as the crackdown on terror is concerned. President Trump very specifically saying that Islamist terrorists, radical terror, Islamist radicals are, of course, a threat, and that is a threat not just to India or the U.S. but to the entire world. A third and a very, very important issue was that of immigration, which was posed, and PM Modi was very clear and very unequivocal that in no country can support illegal immigration, and it's not just about India or the US. There has to be a larger crackdown on those who actually facilitate this. Very often it's the poorest of the poor who get caught in these traps, and even they don't know that they are being misled, but they end up spending a huge amount of money and getting into this kind of trouble. And therefore it's important to crack down on this entire ecosystem that exists as far as this illegal immigration is concerned, and that's why India and US are going to work together on this particular issue as well. So several such important questions that have been stated. There's also the important takeaway of the civil nuclear deal, in the sense that small and medium nuclear reactors, which in fact India and US are going to work towards. President Trump also referring to that, and that of course not just works for the US companies which post the 2008 deal have not been able to operationalize things on ground, also helps India as far as power generation itself is concerned. As far as energy security is concerned as well, Trump, of course, famous for his drill baby drill comment, saying that the US will also be in a position to provide energy to India, and that of course is a very important aspect as well. How that cooperation as far as energy is concerned goes forward and goes forth will also be very interesting to watch out for. So several such important aspects that were touched upon, and of course the close personal friendship between the two very clearly highlighted. The Prime Minister thanking President Trump for the warm welcome, and President Trump also, when asked about who's a better negotiator, said obviously it's Prime Minister Modi. There's no question about that. Prime Minister Modi also, in response to another question, saying that when it comes to deal, there's only one person who can think of, and that is President Trump. So clearly, of course, the bonhomie of the two leaders quite clearly visible at those briefings, and also, of course, talking about, taking inspiration from MAGA, which is very clearly a leitmotif of President Trump's campaigns, and of course the huge support that he enjoys from that MAGA constituency here. He says that on similar lines, he introduced the acronym of MEGA, or Make India Great Again, and saying that the acronym of MAGA and MEGA coming together would be MEGA. And that was, of course, a kind of reference to what Prime Minister Modi wants to achieve, saying that when his goal of Viksit Bharat of 2047 to make India a completely developed country in the 100th year of independence, and really, of course, Viksit Bharat means is nothing but what President Trump is also doing over here in terms of trying to make America great again. So that bonhomie, that partnership only coming through. Of course, there were statements on tariffs which President Trump made, saying that India imposes some of the highest tariffs and they have to work towards that. But the interesting thing was that he also mentioned that there would be a trade deal between the two countries. How that would be worked out and what the time frame and what the contours of that are not entirely clear. But it is a fact that in the first Trump presidency as well, we had seen India and U.S. work on this issue of a trade deal, and whether, of course, that finally sees fruition in terms of President Trump and Prime Minister Modi's push is something that remains to be seen. So a host of issues that have been covered in all of those briefings and those discussions that took place today, and several takeaways coming out from that. Back to you, Pratibha.
Okay, all right, Madhav, thank you for joining us. It was a historic moment. The two of addressing the media and talking about the conversations that they had about the strengthening of the Indo-U.S. ties. A lot more to talk about. We'll also play out the highlights of this speech. Madhav, thank you for joining us. Thanking Kriti Upadhyay as well as Dr. Richard as well for joining us on the broadcast. Very quick break now. We'll be right back with lots more. Do stay with us. Welcome back. A grand joint address, a reaffirmation of the ties and a strong message to the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the United States President Donald Trump stood side by side, showcasing the Indo-U.S. relations at an all-time high. Trump hailed Prime Minister Modi as a very special man and pledged to bolster military sales to India. He vowed to address trade disparities and also resolve the tariff issues, while Prime Minister Modi thanked Trump for the extradition of Tawahu Rana. The two leaders also reaffirmed their commitment to combating terrorism together. So a host of issues that was spoken of in this press briefing. President Trump welcoming Prime Minister Modi as a friend.
Anywhere in the world, they've been very strong on tariffs, and I don't blame them necessarily, but it's a different way of doing business. It's very hard to sell into India because they have trade barriers, very strong tariffs. We are right now a reciprocal nation. We are going to, if it's India or if it's somebody else with low tariffs, we're going to have the same. We're going to have whatever India charges, we're charging them. Whatever another country charges, we're charging them. So it's called reciprocal, which I think is a very fair way. When this isn't India, this is among a lot of nations. The European Union is very difficult for us, very, very difficult. They tax our companies at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They take advantage of a lot of things, so we're not happy about that. China, of course, is terrible, and we have to do that just as a mechanism of fairness.
जहां तक भारत और अमेरिका का सवाल है, हमने हमेशा कहा है कि जो वेरीफाइड होगा, कि जो सच्चे अर्थ में भारत का ही नागरिक होगा, वो अगर अमेरिका में गैर कानूनी तरीके से रहता है तो उसको वापस लेने के लिए भारत तैयार है। ये सामान्य परिवारों के बच्चे होते हैं, उनको बड़े बड़े सपने दिखाए जाते हैं और उनको ज्यादातर ऐसे होते हैं, उनको गुमराह करके लाया जाता है। और इसलिए ये ह्यूमन ट्रैफिकिंग में जुड़े हुए पूरे इकोसिस्टम पर हमने वार करना चाहिए और अमेरिका और भारत मिलकर के हमारी कोशिश है और हमारी कोशिश रहनी चाहिए कि इस प्रकार की पूरी इकोसिस्टम को हमें जड़ मूल से नष्ट करना चाहिए।
So there is a lot that the two leaders spoke about, a host of issues, including Prime Minister Modi saying MEGA plus MAGA. He spoke about Make America Great Again pledge of President Trump and said that the two have one thing in common, and that is nation first. He spoke about MEGA as well, Make India Great Again, and he said both together will be a big decision, a mega decision. And there was a lot of conversation also about trade deals. President Trump also did speak about reciprocal tariff. How is that going to play out will be interesting to see, considering President Trump also mentioned that Prime Minister Modi is a tough negotiator. He said that he's a much better negotiator than he is. And look at the visuals on your screens. So these are the glimpses of everything that happened in the last few hours. And Prime Minister Modi has had a range of meetings. He also met before this Elon Musk as well as Vivek Ramaswamy. But look at the visuals at the screens that show you the moment when Prime Minister Modi arrived at the White House. He was given a very warm welcome in the press briefing as well. President Trump going on to say that he is welcoming his friend Modi. And look at the warm hug that they shared as well, the two leaders meeting, and it speaks of the personal rapport that they share as well. President Trump in the press briefing also spoke about and looked back at the visit that he made to India. He said, it's a beautiful country. I visited and it was a great time. That's a statement that he made in the press briefing. So a warm moment being shared between President Trump as well as Prime Minister Modi. Apart from that, there was an informal press briefing as well, which was at the Oval Office, where yet again, of course, there was a handshake between the two world leaders and they took questions from the press. This was at the Oval Office. And President Trump also had a special gift for Prime Minister Modi that was handed over to him in the presence of the media, and a joint address after that where they took questions from the media as well. And it is in this joint briefing that they spoke about all the conversations that they have had. They spoke about the strong relationship between India as well as the United States. They spoke about the equation that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump had as well. Remember, I told you how President Trump also looked back at his visit to India. And a lot of questions being spoken of, from defense cooperation to one of the biggest takeaways from this meeting is the extradition of the Vahur Rana.
आप जानते हैं, मैं रशिया और यूक्रेन दोनों से लगातार संपर्क में रहा हूं। मैं स्वयं भी दोनों देश की मुलाकात कर चुका हूं। बहुत से लोगों का एक भ्रम है कि भारत न्यूट्रल है। मैं साफ करना चाहता हूं, भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं है। हमारा अपना एक पक्ष है और हमारा पक्ष है शांति, पीस। और मैंने इसी एक हमारे सिद्धांत को लेकर के राष्ट्रपति पुतिन की हाजिरी में मीडिया के सामने स्पष्ट रूप से कहा था कि युद्ध का समय नहीं है। और आज भी मेरा कन्विक्शन है कि युद्ध के मैदान में समस्याओं के समाधान नहीं निकलते हैं, अल्टीमेटली वार्ता के टेबल पर ही होते हैं। और भारत का लगातार प्रयास रहा है कि दोनों लोग जिसमें मौजूद हो वैसे फोरम में बातचीत होगी, तब कोई रास्ता निकलेगा। राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप जो प्रयास कर रहे हैं, मैं उनका स्वागत करता हूं, समर्थन करता हूं और मैं चाहता हूं कि राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप हो सके उतना जल्दी सफल हो ताकि दुनिया में शांति के रास्ते खुले।
And while addressing the press briefing, Trump said that Prime Minister Modi is a tough negotiator. Listen in.
Mr. President, you spoke about Prime Minister Modi as a tough negotiator. Who was a tougher negotiator today and who has a better negotiating tactic when it comes to tariffs?
Oh, he's a much tougher negotiator than me, and he's a much better negotiator than me. There's not even a contest. Okay?
Dr. Richard L. Benkin, author and geopolitical analyst, continues to stay live with us on the broadcast. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Richard. We spoke about some of the key takeaways. There has been a lot of conversation about trade between India and the United States, and President Trump spoke about reciprocal tariff. How is this going to play out? Because he mentioned that, while he also mentioned about increasing trade and also saying that Prime Minister Modi is a tougher negotiator.
Well, I think there's several things. First of all, I would not look at the tariff issue in isolation. I think we saw very clearly in the news conference after the meeting today that there are an enormous number of things on which the United States and India not only can cooperate, not only will cooperate, but must cooperate. So I think you have to look at the prime minister's negotiation skills or the president's negotiation skills within that context. And there are a lot of things on the table that they're going to have to work out. With regard to the tariffs per se, though, I would say the fact that President Trump's order earlier today declaring that tariffs would be reciprocal. Whatever someone puts on us, we'll put on them. I think that set a baseline. To a layman, that seemed rather fair, doesn't it? It's like, well, you're going to charge us 2%, we'll charge you 2%, and everyone will be happy. So, I mean, I just think that, that provides a baseline for those negotiations. More importantly, however, I think it was also very clear that the two men are committed to building a stronger relationship with more and more points of contact. I think if I were Elon Musk or someone of that standing in American business, I'd be drooling. I'd be drooling at the prospect of being able to get into the Indian market. So how those tariffs are negotiated, we really don't know. We do know that we have a baseline, and we do know that we have two individuals sitting down who are committed to expanding the relationship in ways that it just hasn't existed before.
Okay, all right. You know, in fact, there were a range of meetings that the Prime Minister held, including Elon Musk as well as Mike Waltz. He also met Vivek Ramaswamy. So I also want to ask you, before his arrival, I mean, after President Trump took over, there was also a lot of conversation about not just illegal immigration, but even the legal migrants. There were some concerns that had been expressed by the Indian community as well. And India brings with it a huge workforce, skilled workforce for the United States. It's something that U.S. can leverage. But over the last few days, there have been a lot of conversations against legal immigration as well. So where does U.S. stand on that? Of course, President Trump as well as Elon Musk have made their stance very clear that they are in favor of H-1B visas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are really so many points to address. Let me start with this. I've spent an awful lot of time on the Indian borders with Bangladesh and Nepal and Pakistan, and it's very clear that India has the same issue with illegal immigration that the United States does. So I think right there, the two countries can learn a lot from each other to help defeat this problem. With regard to legal immigration, the discussion's been around the volume H-1B visas, and I think there's going to be posturing. There are people, there are constituencies that feel one way or the other. However, I would listen more to what Elon Musk has been saying about it than what Steve Bannon has been saying about this, whereas Musk has said we need to have those high-quality legal immigrants in this country. I think in the first term, you might have looked at what Steve Bannon has to say, but not today. He's certainly someone that represents the constituency, but that's the key. I also, let's talk about realities here. And the reality that all of the world faces is demographics. We know, for instance, that China will have, by the end of the century, will have half the population it had at the beginning of the century. And with that sort of drop, there's no way it can feed its military, feed its economy the way it had hoped to. The United States is the only Western democracy that will see an increase in its population between 2000 and 2100. Now, our fertility rates, our demographics are really not much different than other Western countries. I think we're 1.7 or 1.9, which is below the 2.1 replacement rate. Where the United States continues to grow in population is through immigration. As we know, people want to come to the United States. There's opportunity here. So I think talks of, well, how can we look at legal immigration? I really think that's just posturing. That's for different constituencies. Mm-hmm. Immigration is absolutely critical to the United States' future. And then also, if you talk about immigration, think about how many Indian citizens would have thought that their prime minister would come to the United States and talk to an official, the top intelligence official in the country, and her name is Tulsi, where he speaks with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes. The
fact is that more and more Americans have Indian roots and Indian backgrounds and are growing and growingly important constituency or part of the American public. So I really do believe that the focus is not on legal immigration. It's going to be on illegal immigration. And my goodness, you have the United States and India trying to do something about it. I don't know how they're going to fail.
Okay. In fact, you mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. After her confirmation, Prime Minister Modi was one of the first world leaders to have met her. It could be because of coincidence, because he happened to be in the United States, but he was one of the first, if not the very first world leader that she did meet. But on India and the United States having numerous areas of cooperation reflecting the relationship, the strong relationship between the two, we must mention the F-35 stealth fighter jets as well. It's a big deal between the two countries. How significant is it?
It's enormously significant. There really aren't very many countries in the world that the United States are willing to sell F-35s to. I mean, Israel is the biggest one. So I think the deal for F-35s stealth fighters, it just indicates the standing with which the United States and certainly the Trump administration hold India, and not only the importance that we see with our Indian brothers and sisters, but it does indicate just how critical it is that India has what it needs to play that important role in leading, with the United States, leading the world's democracies against the group of authoritarian countries that seek to replace democracy.
Okay, all right. And apart from the conversations we've had on trade, the defense, there's one equation that is spoken of quite often, is that of Prime Minister Modi as well as President Trump. They have a personal equation. They've met each other on many occasions. In fact, President Trump, as he started his press briefing as well, spoke about the time he visited India. He spoke about the hospitality that was extended to him. He also mentioned Prime Minister Modi as his friend. Now, of course, India and U.S. relations are extremely strong. And, whether or not there is a personal rapport, that doesn't really matter, because the relationship between the two countries, the people-to-people relations, is so strong. But it does help when the world leaders also have a very strong equation. How do you see that actually translate into action?
Okay, I agree with you entirely. There has to be more than that, but that is really important because it means that the two individuals feel comfortable with each other, trust one another. I like to think of Namo's campaign slogan of more government, less government, which is very much what Donald Trump is doing in the United States. So the two leaders see the world pretty much in the same way. Obviously, their countries sometimes have different interests, and that's fine. That's why you can't have MAGA and MIGA. But it means that they can cut through a lot of the things that others would have to dance with each other about, and just get to the meat of the issue. And I think the meat of the issue here is that without a strong India-United States relationship, the world is a lesser place than what it would be with that. Absolutely.
In fact, they also spoke about some of the key issues in the world, and we'll come to that as well. Dr. Richard, for the moment, thank you for joining us with a U.S. perspective on that meeting. We're slipping into a very quick break here. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.